Hello, everyone. This is Global Warming Skeptic, and we need to have a talk about Bernie Sanders once again and his socialist policies. And within the context of this, a recent Gallup poll found that 36% of Americans want socialism. It's still relatively low compared to the capitalists because it has a very heavy disapproval rate. But the fact that it is this high is scary considering throughout my entire life and in the 80s and early 90s, we lived in prosperous times. There was plenty for everybody, even the poor. And we had plenty of personal freedoms. And so you have to we have to get into a discussion about if people do want socialism indeed, and this is going to be the trend, what socialism means. And here's what it means: you're losing your personal freedoms. Yes, I will say that again. With socialism, you are losing your personal freedoms, not for the name of democracy, because we do not live in a democracy where less than 1% of all federal employees and officials are elected. We do not live in a democracy or anything that resembles a democracy because our lives are controlled by a group of bureaucrats that are not elected by the people and in most cases aren't even appointed directly by Congress or the president. They are hired by other bureaucrats who are also hired by other bureaucrats. These specific heads may be approved by Congress, but they have infinite tenure. They stay there till they're fired or till they're retired. They don't have term limits. The head of the FCC is going to be there until he is removed and replaced. Same thing with every other bureaucracy. And it's not just that, it's the whole concept of socialism is not freedom. For example, government regulation of healthcare, Obamacare. Here's what you're told to do. Here's the freedoms that you're losing. Number one, you lose your freedom to decide what kind of healthcare you want. You're limited to how high. You're limited to what kind of care you can accept, the minimum amount of coverage you can receive. If you're in your 20s and you don't want heart disease covered, too bad. If you don't want dental care covered, too bad. Because other people are deciding, not you. Not you. This isn't your freedom. This is other people telling you what you ought to have. That's not freedom, folks. Same thing with auto insurance, another socialist policy. It doesn't matter if you're purchasing private insurance. The reality is this: the government's telling you what to purchase, what you must pay for. And what Bernie Sanders is proposing is this: you don't want to pay for education beyond high school? Too bad. You're doing it anyhow. You don't have that freedom because he wants to give the power to the crony bureaucrats. See, this is the real side of Bernie Sanders. And I'm not saying Bernie Sanders doesn't have good qualities, because he apparently does, but the bottom line is this: he's for the cronies. He's saying, yeah, I see all the abuse in Washington. Here, have more of it. Have more government involvement in your lives. Have more government failures to stop corruption at all levels. Here, have more government failure to reduce poverty levels. It doesn't matter if you don't think it's sound. If you don't think it's sound, too bad. You're doing it anyhow. And see, that's the whole point of freedom. With freedom, you don't have to say, too bad. You don't have to defend yourself against that. It's basically this. You have your own money. You spend your money how you want to spend it. And if you ever slip up and you need help, there's not even a too bad there, because you know what? There will be other people with good hearts and good heads who will be able to help you out of that situation. It may not be as much of a safeguard. And note, I do believe in some government safety nets. They are necessary, because I don't believe you should even have to answer that question necessarily, where, you know, do I have to ask somebody else for help? You shouldn't really have to do that. There should be a minimum standard of living. And in the comments, I've discussed various entitlement options, how we could do that, where the people would have better entitlements instead of more entitlements, where they're in control of the expenses and all the government's doing is just providing them money. But that's a topic for another video. The point I'm getting at is there's a difference between, we're going to help you survive. We're going to give you a roof over your head and food to eat. There's a difference between that and we're going to decide what wages you can ask for, what kind of toothpaste you use, what kind of dental care you get, what kind of education you get. Those are personal decisions. And people have to make sacrifices. They have to decide, okay, I want to spend my money on this, this, and this in the short term. Okay, I may not get an education, but I'm going to enjoy life now. Or you have your savers who will say, I'm going to save up my money, and I hope that my dollar is worth in 10 years relatively close to what it's worth now, and I want to save up to go to school. And when I go to school, to not have to break myself doing it. There's options when you give people the freedom. It's not just you want this way. If you don't want it this way, too bad. No, because with freedom comes options, and with socialism, you don't have options. You are to do things one way. If you don't do them that way, then you get thrown in jail. That's the way it works in a socialism. You are forced into abiding by a specific rule set, and you are forced to fall in line with it. This is the real Bernie Sanders. And yes, he's a politician. He's good at saying what he has to get voted in. If you look at Bernie Sanders' education and you look at his early involvements, they are all political. He was in the Socialist Party in the 70s. He has a degree in political science. All his life, Bernie Sanders has learned to win elections. Here's what Bernie Sanders hasn't done. He hasn't created a job. He hasn't worked at a meaningful job. He has not done anything for the community. He was a mayor of a town full of filthy rich people, Burlington, Vermont. Look it up for yourself, a very wealthy town. He's not the candidate this country needs if you want freedoms. If you don't want freedoms, and if you don't want democracy, then Bernie Sanders is your guy because he's going to take your freedoms and he's going to take this democracy away. And that's just the fact of it. The sooner you learn that socialism means the eradication of personal freedoms, just and just another point, I think we can all agree on this one. 2 points, actually. Number one, military spending. The military industrial complex. Guess what? That comes with socialism. You think that our military is going to shrink because we have a socialist in office? No. Socialist countries normally have large militaries, unless you're European. But even the Europeans, they don't have they don't have a voluntary military. They have compulsory military service. But if you look at most socialist nations around the world, they have pretty large militaries compared to non-socialist nations. And another big thing, and this one we will all agree on, is the NSA, another socialist program. Because in order to enforce these socialist programs, guess what? Your name's got to be in a database for the government to be able to look up forever. Permanent databases, such as those kept by Social Security and, of course, the NSA. But the Social Security one, nobody ever complains about because it's already established. But guess what? That Social Security does the same thing. It's they have all your information at their fingertips, and with more socialism, you're going to get more of that. So, America, and this isn't for Europeans, you got a decision. The decision is, do you want freedom or do you want to be controlled? Thanks for listening. God bless.